Hey, everybody. So, today I'm going to talk to you about Hamlet Act 1, Scene 3, and give you kind of the general rundown, the summary, and analysis. So, this one is really focused on Polonius and his two children. So, you might remember Laertes has asked the king to go back to France. He wants to go back to college. The whole party scene isn't for him, and he would just rather get back to his studies. So he stops by on his way to the boats. He stops by to say his goodbyes to his sister, and he can't leave without giving his sister some brotherly advice. And he tells his sister Ophelia that he knows that she and Hamlet have kind of a thing going, and he tells her that he doesn't approve. He's like, I'm your older brother, and I'm telling you, I don't approve of your relationship with Hamlet. And he tells her um, that he knows about how close they're getting, how mushy they're getting with each other. Hamlet's giving her gifts and love letters and just really pursuing her pretty hard. Laertes is against this for a couple of reasons. His first reason is he just doesn't believe Hamlet's genuine. He thinks Hamlet is just trying to pursue her because maybe he thinks she's hot or something. But whatever the case may be, he doesn't think that Hamlet genuinely cares for her. Maybe Hamlet's just trying to have his way with her or something. Um, and the other reason he doesn't approve is because, as he points out to his sister, Hamlet is a prince, she is not a princess. And if Hamlet has to choose, if they get serious and it gets to the point where they want to get married, he says Hamlet is probably going to have to choose between his country, his crown, and his woman. And Laertes says, he can't marry you because you're not a princess. And if he has to choose between keeping his crown and not being with you, or being with you and not keeping his crown, he's going to choose his crown. Or so Laertes thinks. He may be kind of a chip off the old block. His father, Polonius, is not very good at advice either. And so this could be a sign of Laertes kind of being similar to his dad in that way, because this is terrible advice. It's practical. I mean, I get where Laertes is coming from, but as you'll see later, Hamlet's love for Ophelia is genuine. Spoiler alert. But anyway, so as they're talking, he tells his sister to remember this. Remember the advice that he's given her. And she says, I will, right? And then Polonius, Mr. Nosy, Mr. Terrible advice, Mr. Long winded speeches, he comes in. Now remember, the thing about Polonius is that he is the king's advisor. He's used to giving people his opinion, he's used to giving people advice, and he believes that he has all the answers. The problem with Polonius is he's a moron, and his advice is typically pretty terrible. So he comes in and he tells Laertes, you got to get a move on. The boats are going to leave before you get there if you don't hurry it up. And so Laertes is like, I know, I'm going. And here's the irony. Here's the funny part. So Polonius tells him, you got to hurry. But then he gives this long-winded, rambling speech about all this different life advice that he wants Laertes to follow while he's away in France. Polonius is like, I'm not going to be there to guide you, so here's a bunch of advice that I'm just going to dump on you that you need to follow while you're in France. And it's this long-winded speech, and you're like, I thought you said he had a boat to catch. So it's a bit of humor, it's a bit of irony that Shakespeare's throwing our way, because remember, Polonius is the king's advisor, but he's a moron, and he's kind of the comic relief. So anyway, after his really long-winded speech, Laertes leaves. And Polonius, he just can't leave well enough alone. So he's like, hey, daughter, what were you and your brother talking about? And she's like, something about Hamlet. And Polonius, he's like, oh, let me tell you about Hamlet. I know that you and Hamlet have been getting really cozy with each other. There are rumors going around, and as your father, I believe the rumors instead of you, which is not very nice. So he basically tells her that he's believing the rumors and not her. And she's like, but Dad, Hamlet and I aren't being inappropriate. We're not taking our relationship to a physical level that would be inappropriate for this time period. And her father's like, well, you better not. And he says, in fact, I don't believe Hamlet loves you. I think Hamlet's just trying to get with you. And if he gets with you in the way that I think he wants to, he's going to completely ruin your reputation. Keep in mind, remember, this time period, a woman's virginity was incredibly important to her. Because if she wasn't a virgin, or if it was suspected that she wasn't, no guy would want to be with her. And they didn't really have a way to um, make a living for themselves. So her reputation, her virginity, was really one of the most important things to her. And Polonius is worried that Hamlet's trying to take that from her. So she's like, but Hamlet isn't doing anything like that. In fact, he loves me. And her father's like, how do you know he loves you? And she says, well, because he gives me gifts and love letters all the time. And her father's like, whatever. He's just trying to get with you. And then he says, I forbid you from seeing Hamlet any further. In fact, as your father, I order you to break up with him. Now, from your notes before, you learned that Ophelia is very loyal and obedient to her father. And that's 100% true. As much as she loves Hamlet, and as much as she believes that Hamlet loves her, she is completely obedient to her father, and she begrudgingly says, I will obey. And she has resolved herself to break up with Hamlet. And this is going to cause some great conflict later. So that is the end of scene 3.